Welcome to Kathryn Raaker's World. Innovation, culture, adventure, fashion and health, artists, destinations, traditions. This is Kathryn Raaker's World.
Hi, this is Kathryn Raaker of Kathryn Raaker's World, a syndicated TV show, and Let's Just Talk, a syndicated radio show. I have the honor of having the wonderful gentleman, scholar, great soldier, and he is Brigadier General John G, Kulhavi, U.S. Army retired. And this is the biography of him. Doesn't look like he's changed too much at all, actually. So anyhow, a friend of his that he went to college with, university with, Don Steele, wrote the book. But the book is No Soldier Left Behind. And the author brings to life an impressive hero both on the field of battle and off, offering a true inspiration into how to live a life. And he's a philanthropist. He worked for a wonderful Merrill Lynch. He changed a lot of things, which made it even better. And I'm honored to have him on my show today. And he's a hero in my heart. And I want to thank you for your service and everything you've done, not only for the military, but for the university that you support all the time. And would you tell them the university and what you've done with it?
I got my start at Central Michigan University, and I was fortunate enough to be on many boards. In particular, I was on the board of trustees, and I chaired it for some period of time. My proudest accomplishment, I think, when I was chair of the board, the president of the university at that time was Mike Rao. He's currently at Virginia Commonwealth University. But Mike asked me to come to his office prior to a board meeting, and I walked in, and with him was a gentleman by the name of Steve Smith, the public relations director for the university. And he said, "John, we want to do something for it." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You serve on all these committees. You're our largest living donor. You do a lot for us. We want to reciprocate and do something for you. What can we do?" Well, it took me about 3 seconds. I said, "I'd like a nice sign in front of the ROTC building." He said, "That's what you'd like?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm curious why." I said, "When I was a student, we had a beautiful brick building right in the center campus housing the ROTC. I said, today you have been relegated to the back of the oldest building on campus, the old Finch Field House." And I said, "There's a metal sign about a foot long and about 3 inches wide in front of the building, says ROTC. Now, this was 1990-91. We're getting ready to go in the desert. I was very, very active in Desert Storm. I said, there's a good chance that a lot of these graduates are going to end up in a combat zone. They should have more recognition than they're currently getting." He said, "If that's what you want, that's what we'll get." A couple months later, I was back on campus. Mike Rao asked me to come to his office again. With him was the campus engineer, Steve Smith, the PR director, and President Rao. They said, "Let's walk across the street and look at your sign." We walked across the street. There was a metal sign about probably 18 inches wide, about 18 inches high, said Army ROTC. "How do you like your sign?" My exact words were, I said, "It sucks. That's the best you guys could do." And the campus engineer said, "We have a signage ordinance. That's the biggest sign we can put up." I said, "You're joking." He said, "Nope, that's the biggest." I said, "Okay, do you have a monument ordinance?" He said, "Monument ordinance? Never heard of one." I said, "Good, we're going to build a monument." So we did. It's got a brick hearth. It's all marble. It's huge. In big gold letters says Army ROTC. It's got their emblem on it. And everyone that walks by or drives by can see it. It stands out like a sore thumb. That's my proudest accomplishment at Central.
I love it. It sucks. I love what you said. That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. You know, I'll tell you what, because, and I told you that, you know, I feel like I've lived a military life all my life, right? But I'll tell you what, I have so many friends that were in Vietnam that were everywhere, John, if you don't mind me calling you John.
No, John is good. That's my name.
And, you know, it's amazing how many of my friends were ROTC and then went to Vietnam and died. And so it's wonderful to have somebody that cares about the ROTC. And that's how, but I want to go back in time because your mother was really special, wasn't she?
Yes, she was the most generous person I've ever known. She gave everything we ever owned away, but she was very happy with it, and I was happy for her.
Now were you the oldest in your family?
Yes, I was. I
Like
was
me.
just of 4 children.
4 children, well, 7 on my call, but that's all right. You actually worked and helped your mom through tough times, and you were, you know, it reminds me. I mean, your life is very similar to mine in a sense, because when you're from a family where the mother is the main figure, right? Because my mom and dad were divorced, but then they remarried and had a couple more kids. You learn so much so that when you grow up, you really appreciate what they did for you and what they went through. Am I right?
No question. I did whatever I could to be able to afford to buy food. I picked up bottles underneath mobile homes and people that came up north in northern Michigan on weekends left behind. I cashed them in to buy milk and bread. I could tell you a lot of stories. One of my favorite ones, the local paper was the Ogemaw County Herald. The city of West Branch was 20 miles north of where I lived. That's where they published it. And I looked at the want ads every week when it was published. And one day they were advertising for a driver. And the only criteria was you had to have a valid driver's license. So I called, I applied for the job, and I said, what does the job entail? They say you have to transport 5 people from West Branch to Traverse City. That was about a 4-hour drive, I guess. Anyway, I said I'd like the job, and they said, you got it. They told me what day I had to be in West Branch. My mother had a 1955 4-door 6-cylinder automatic Chevy, downhill with a strong wind and may hit 65 miles an hour. I asked my mom if I could use her car. I calculated I could net $14. They're going to pay me $20. Gas was 33.9 cents a gallon, and $14 was a lot of money for a day's work. So I drove to West Branch on a designated day. I had to sign all these forms, and they brought out 5 adults that were all 100% mentally retarded. And I loaded them in the car, 3 in the back seat, 2 in the front with me. That was before seat belts. And I had a guy sitting in the back seat on the passenger side who looked like a serial killer, but he was as docile as a kitten. About halfway to Traverse City, and this serial killer looking guy starts yelling, gotta go bathroom, gotta go bathroom. I said, hang on, I'll get you to a bathroom. Well, I drove as fast as I could to the city of Kalkaska. Now, Kalkaska is on one main street with stores lined up on both sides. I pulled right in the middle of the street. I got out of the car. I got him out. I told Russ, wait here. I'll be right back. Went inside, explained the situation to the lady behind the counter. She said, yes, you use the restroom. It's at the back of the store. I walked back with him, waited till he was done. He came out. We walked outside. The other 4 were long gone. It took me 2.5 hours. They were scattered all over that town. And all the time I'm thinking, let's see, I signed for 5. What would they do to me if I delivered 3 or 4 or 2? And so I had these chain of retarded individuals. Whenever I find one, I'm holding hands with the serial killer looking guy. He'd hold hands with the next one. I got this whole procession of retarded individuals walking up and down the aisles of every store in that town. Took me 2.5 hours to find them. I was supposed to be in Traverse City late that afternoon. I got there late at night. They paid me by $20. I resigned from the job and drove home. But it was and the interesting thing, one of the guys, He must have picked them up at a store, but his pockets were filled with penny suckers. He must have eaten 10 or 20 suckers in the last 2 hours of the drive. He just helped himself to a batch of suckers and he was a happy camper. Anyway, it worked out.
You know what? I thought that was one of the funniest parts of the book because he had some similar situations. I didn't last one day on the job because it was so weird. So I understand that totally, believe me. You know, one of the things I want to know was when your friend who you went to college with, right? Who
He's
did,
charters, yeah.
yeah, and he's colorblind, he told me, so he couldn't get into the military. Let me ask you this question. When he came to you and said, did you ask him to write the book or did he volunteer to do it?
Oh, Don Steele. No, Don came to me and said, he's written a number of books of individuals. He said, you have the most interesting background of anyone I've ever known. I'd like to write a book about you. And I never wrote the book with the intention that it would be published or made public. I wrote it because between Carol and I, we have 15 grandchildren.
Oh.
None of them know anything about my background. And I thought if they ever want to learn, I'll just give them a copy of the book and it tells pretty much the story. That was the purpose of it.
That was the purpose of it. I think it was really, like you said, I would be able to read it in one night, and I did.
Yeah, it's an easy read.
3 o'clock in the morning to read it because I don't get off of work usually until, I'm still working during the night practically. And I just couldn't put it down. It was so good. It was great.
Thank you.
I mean that. I told Scott today, I said it's a 5-star. It really is. And, I think you give your mom a lot of credit in the book. And that actually made you a stronger personality. Would you say that's true?
Yes, it is.
Well, I had 5 brothers and 1 sister. And, all of them were in the military except for 2. And I have to say that it did make them strong individuals, right? And I was very proud of them. Let me ask you, now, there were 4 of you. Were there 3 girls and you were the only boy?
There were 3 boys and 1 girl. And then many years later, when I was 18 years old, my mother had a 5th child, my half-sister Kathy, who resides in Las Vegas with her husband and her son and her daughter.
Oh, wow. So there's 5 of you altogether. That's pretty
Yes, sir. Yep.
Now, is your mom still alive, John?
No, she died at age 63 of cancer.
Oh, wow. I'm so sorry. Mine died at 65. My father died at 65 with bone and prostate cancer. So I really, truly understand. I miss him terribly. He was the light of my life. And he was a very famous musician. And he was he was the first one that was in the country, and he changed the name, the beautiful name Bohenik, to Bochenek. And
Okay.
what is that? So anyhow, your family was Polish and Yugoslavian?
Yes.
That's right. So the Yugoslavian your mother was Polish,
My
right?
mother was Polish. My father's parents were from Yugoslavia, but my father was born in the United States.
Was born in the United States, just like my dad. So let me ask this question. You went to high school, right? Went to grade
Yes.
school, high school, and then you applied for ROTC, am I correct?
No, I applied for an application to Central Michigan University. And the reason I selected Central were several. It was inexpensive. I had no money. I was going to pay my way through college on my own. I worked a minimum of 3, and at one time I had as many as 5 jobs. The tuition was reasonable. My best friend, Keith Charters, was a year ahead of me in high school. He was a student there. He loved it. And it was probably about 120 miles from the town I grew up in. And every weekend I would go back there and work at a grocery store Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday, and then drive back to Mount Pleasant Sunday night. So it met my criteria, and I have no regrets. But I will tell you this, any success I may have achieved in life, I attribute to the time I spent on active duty in the Army. I learned three things that I don't think I would have learned anywhere else. At a very young age, you were placed with tremendous responsibility. My first assignment after I went through Armor Officer School was to become a tank commander. And we had 5 M60A1 tanks that were meticulously maintained. They were in a heated garage on main post. And they were the only tanks on main post that always had a full complement of live ammunition. And I was put in charge of those. It was some regularity. I'd get a phone call, never knew what time of day or night. And they would time us from the time I got the call till I got my first sergeant, till we got all the crew members. There's a 4-man crew at each tank. We go to that garage, start those M60s and drive them as fast as we could down to Main Street to Fort Knox, and we surrounded the gold vault. Our job was to protect the vault in the event of enemy ground or air attack. At the time, I thought it was pretty serious stuff. I look back at it, we don't even know if there's any gold in there. And I'm not sure if 5 tanks would have been that much of a deterrent, but that was my job. Then in Vietnam, after 3.5 months, I was designated to be the primary flight leader. I got to pick out every member of 10 crews every day to fly combat missions. So at a young age, I had a lot of responsibility. I was 24 when I was a flight leader. You learn to make decisions quickly, and they had to be the right decisions, or it could cost lives or equipment or both. And thirdly, I learned how people reacted under tremendous stress. It was a very interesting experience. I found no correlation between courage and physical stature. Sometimes the biggest, meanest, toughest guys totally fell apart when the bullets started flying, and the 90-pound weaklings rose to the occasion. So I think the lessons I learned there, and especially about working as a team, I depended on every crew member, just like they depended on me to fly the aircraft. Those lessons benefited me in my career at Merrill Lynch and in my personal endeavors.
John, now tell us, you took what you learned in the military and how many flights did you make in Vietnam?
I flew over 300 combat missions, and that doesn't include resupply, picking up bodies, wounded, but over 300 combat missions. That was pretty standard.
Pretty standard. So when you came back from Vietnam, then what, John?
If it were up to me, I would have stayed in the Army, but my first wife at the time, I was shot down twice the first time. We had a child shortly after I got back, and I loved the Army, and she said, why don't you try civilian life for a year, and if you don't like it, you can always go back in the Army. And I thought that was a reasonable request. My last assignment on active duty, I was in charge of academics at the Army's primary helicopter training center at Fort Wilderness, Texas. We trained the Army and the Marine pilots because the Marines didn't have a rotary wing school. So I was going to look for a career that would basically reward me for my personal effort, my work ethic, and so on. And the brokerage industry seemed to fit the bill. Now, I knew nothing about it. I learned a little bit from guys that I worked with in the Army. I found it fascinating. I sent letters to 5 Merrill Lynch officers. 4 of them said thank you, but no thanks. The 5th one was at the Fisher Building in downtown Detroit. Called me and said, we'd like to interview you and have you take a series of tests. So I flew to Michigan from Texas. My flight was late arriving. Back then, it was still fairly early in the war and they didn't harass you. If you flew in uniform, you got a discounted airfare. My flight was late arriving. One of my brothers was going to pick me up and take me to my mother's house to change clothes, put on a suit, and go in for the interview and take the 2 tests. One was IQ, one was aptitude. Anyway, the flight was late. I didn't want to be late, so I told my brother to take me directly to the Fisher Building. I walked in uniform. The manager was the best manager I ever had of my entire 48-year career. His name was Fred Pickard. And his claim to fame, he caught 2 touchdown passes in the 1955 Rose Bowl playing for the University of Michigan. He was a great, great man. Anyway, I think he recognized the ribbons on my uniform. And I took the test, had a brief interview with him. And then they called me about 2 weeks later. I passed the test. They wanted me back for another interview. I came back the second time. We spent probably 3 hours together. And he said, we'll have you back for 1 or 2 more interviews. I said, Mr. Pickard, I've given you all my military efficiency reports. You know all about my background. You have my college transcripts. I can't afford to fly back and forth. I only have limited time and I have limited funds. I said, I think you know right now if you're going to hire me or not. He stared at me for a long time. With him was whoever spoke first kind of lost. And he looked at me and he said, I'll offer you $750 a month. And I said, you must be joking. He looked at me and he said, I don't joke. And I said, make it 800. He looked, stared. He said, 775. I stood up, reached across the desk and said, you got me. Thank you. That was my start at Merrill Lynch, and I had a phenomenal career. I think the thing I'm most proud of at that time, stockbrokers, financial advisors, financial consultants, the titles have changed over the years, but it's the same job. You were expected to master this vast array of products that I don't think anyone could master. So my time in the military, everything was based on teams. As a tank commander, as a Huey pilot, as a flight leader, everything were teams. I kept going to him and said, Mr. Pickard, I truly believe if we function as teams of specialists, we could certainly provide much better performance and I believe far better service than one individual can. And finally, after many months of nagging him, he called me to his office one day, handed me an airline ticket, said, tomorrow morning you're flying to New York City. You're going to go to the Merrill Lynch headquarters. You have a 1-hour meeting with Donald Reagan. Donald Reagan was chairman of the board of Merrill Lynch. He later became Secretary of the Treasury and the Chief of Staff to President Ronald Reagan. I took a cab, went to the Merrill Lynch office. I did a little bit of homework. Mr. Reagan was a combat veteran in the Marines of World War II. I was Vietnam. We had something in common. For an hour, he questioned me profusely, asked a lot of questions. I gave him the most definitive answers I could. I told him how I thought this could benefit the firm and us as individuals. At the end of an hour, he said, I like it, do it. Picked up the phone, he called Fred Pickard and let him form a team. To the best of my knowledge, that was 1971. That was the first team in brokerage existence. Today, over 80% of advisors are on teams. They saw the wisdom in it, and they want everyone to be on the team. So I'm very proud of that.
Well, I think you should be because when I read it in the book, I thought, yay, you brought in like an amusement park and golf.
Well, there are two separate locations.
Okay.
My camp that I use to host a lot of different groups. We use it for fundraisers for different sports teams at Central Michigan University. I had the entire women's golf team and the head coach there a few weeks ago. We've had the men's basketball team, the women's basketball team. We raised money for the wrestling program, for football. And we host a lot of veterans groups. I have Rolling Thunder up there every year and a lot of veterans. It started out as 320 acres 53 years ago. Today it's 1,038 acres. We have about 10 miles of road. We have 3 pole barns with 43 or 44 vehicles. We have a Grand Prix go-kart track with 10 state-of-the-art go-karts, very challenging, and everyone loves driving on it. A beautiful miniature golf course with a lot of moving parts. We have a tilt-a-whirl with a permanent cover, a carnival swing, a quarter-mile oval racetrack that's 60 feet wide, banked 12 feet. I used to have 5 race cars. I just gave one away to a young man who wants to race it. So we have 4 race cars that we drive on that track. We have a stock trout pond, a rifle range, a trap range, a host of things to do. We have a bocce ball court, and my wife works very hard helping me entertain groups of people, and we get much satisfaction from seeing them have fun.
And then you have golf courses, right?
Yeah, I have 3 golf courses, and then 18.5 miles from my camp, I built Cedar Valley. It's Cedar Valley Golf Course, which according to the PGA on a 5-point scale gets a 4.8, so it's pretty good. Then I own the Pines Golf Course 7 miles away. And on the north side of Cedar Valley, I built an RV park that also gets a perfect 5. And across the street, the second largest amusement park in the state of Michigan, that gets a 4.8. That's the dumbest thing I ever did in my life. It'll never make money. And it wasn't designed to make money. We charge about half what they charge for rides at a county fair. There's no admission. I did it for the people that have cottages that come up there on weekends and the people that live there, because the highlight of my year was going to the Aranac County Fair in Standish, Michigan, 3 nights a week in August. I never had any money. I like the sight, the smell, the action. When I did have money, my favorite ride was a tilt-a-whirl. Today I have a tilt-a-whirl at my camp. I have one at my amusement park, and I got a third one in storage if I ever need a backup. So if you ever need a tilt-a-whirl, give me a call.
Thank God he has a really big place for you in heaven, John.
I don't know about that.
I think so. I think so. I think one of the statements, that you never make money on it, but you know what? You bring happiness and joy to the people that get to come. And I love amusement parks.
Well, you'd love mine then. It's a beautiful park. We have 20-some rides, and we just built a beautiful go-kart track, and we have 9 go-karts, and that'll be open Memorial Day 2025.
It's such a pleasure. I can't wait to interview you again, if you'll let me.
Yes, definitely.
And I'm going to see you very shortly, and I'm going to get to meet your beautiful wife and your friend Don, who calls me every day. And I just love it. I think you've been the most interesting interview I've had. I have to tell you this, John. I got to interview POWs that were in Vietnam and the Hanoi Hilton.
I know several, yes.
And one of the people will be there at the Patriot Ball. And I just loved them. And actually, that in Arlington, Texas, we got the newest, we're building the Medal of Honor Hall of Fame. And we're going to have a room with Vietnam. And I did a series of filming with all of these 11 POWs. And I'm just so thrilled that they're going to have those stories on there. I love your book. It's great. I hope you have another book to go after this. And you're just delightful to have as a guest. Thank you so very much. I'm honored to have you.
And I'm honored to be on your show. Thank you very much for having me, and I hope we get to see each other again. Thank you.
Oh, you will in a couple weeks. Hello. Okay.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. And don't forget to go to our website at KathrynRaakersWorld.com, letsjusttalk.com, and I also have a chef show, The Chef You and I, a healthy cooking show. See you soon.